I'm Margot Robinson, 26 years old, and I became valedictorian at Harvard after working 3 jobs to put myself through school. For years, I did everything I could to earn my parents' respect, helped with their errands, supported my siblings, stayed quiet, and never asked for much. But when they told me I was too stupid for college and used my college fund to buy my brother a car, I made a decision that changed the course of my life. Have you ever been dismissed or underestimated by the very people you thought would be in your corner? If you have, drop your story in the comments because you're not alone. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to fight for your future without anyone backing you up, hit that like button and subscribe. This is a story about keeping your head down, showing up anyway, and what happens when the world finally has to pay attention. I was the youngest of 3. My brother Dylan was the golden child. He was captain of the soccer team, always had a girlfriend, always had a new trophy on the shelf. My parents used to call him our future lawyer, even when he was 14. My sister, Kara, was the artistic one. She played piano, cello, even dabbled in sculpture for a while. They turned the den into a music room just for her. She had a baby grand piano by the time she was 10. Me, I liked reading. Not flashy books, just regular ones. I read manuals, instruction booklets, old encyclopedias. I liked puzzles. I liked school. I liked being useful. I didn't ask for much. I figured that if I helped out, they'd notice me eventually. I kept the peace. I ran errands. I sorted laundry before anyone asked. I learned how to make dinner by watching my mom, not that she ever taught me directly. She preferred when people stayed out of her way in the kitchen. So I just watched. I made myself useful. When my dad started a small side hustle selling tools online, I offered to help with the shipping labels. It turned into me doing all his invoices. Every Saturday afternoon, I'd sit at the desk with his faded notebook and enter all the receipts into a spreadsheet. He didn't pay me. I didn't ask. He used to pat my head when he walked by. That was enough back then. At school, I wasn't anyone special. I didn't stand out, but my grades were solid and I actually liked my classes. Teachers liked me because I did the work. I got my homework in early. I volunteered for the group projects no one else wanted. I didn't complain. I didn't talk about college until the end of junior year. I waited. I watched the way my parents acted with Dylan during his application process. The spreadsheets my mom made. The campus tour they flew out for. When Kara applied to her music conservatory, they paid for extra lessons, portfolio coaching, and a custom dress for her audition. I figured maybe it was just a matter of timing. So I waited until I'd narrowed down my list. 5 schools. 2 of them had full-ride scholarships for students in our income bracket. I printed out the list and the financial aid forms, and I placed them neatly on the kitchen counter one night after dinner. My dad was still finishing his coffee. My mom was flipping through a magazine. I said, "Hey, I have a few schools I want to apply to. These ones have good merit aid programs. I already filled in most of the forms." My mom didn't even glance at the papers. She made a face like I'd handed her a parking ticket. My dad chuckled and said, "We're not wasting money on someone like you." I thought he was joking. I waited for the smirk or the nudge or even a dry follow-up. But it didn't come. He just went back to his coffee. I stood there for a second, then reached over and picked up the papers again. "Some of these don't require any money up front," I said. "Just a signature for the FAFSA, I already." My mom cut me off. "Don't start something you can't finish. You don't have the kind of brain for college, sweetheart. That's not a bad thing. You're good at practical stuff." I remember just nodding. That's all I did. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I nodded, folded the forms in half, and went back to my room. That night, I pulled out the scholarship list I'd been compiling for 6 months. Some of them didn't require parental information. Some offered application fee waivers. I kept working. At school, I didn't mention any of it. My friends were all buzzing about SATs and essays and recommendation letters. I just nodded along. I didn't tell them what my parents had said. I still helped out at home. I wasn't going to stop being the one who made dinner when mom worked late. I still typed invoices. I still watched Dylan's dog when he went away for soccer tournaments. I think a part of me still hoped that if I proved I was serious, they'd change their minds. That maybe my dad had just had a bad day. That maybe my mom didn't mean it the way it sounded. But then, one night in August, my brother came home with a new car. Not brand new, but close. It had tinted windows and one of those backup cameras. I asked him how he paid for it. "Oh," he said, "Dad helped me out. Said it's for commuting to the office job I'm starting. You know, something to get me started." That was when it really settled in. They had the money, just not for me. I didn't cry, I don't think I even got angry. I just sat with it, like it was weather. The next morning, I went to the library and printed out 10 more scholarship applications. I stayed late and asked my English teacher for a second letter of recommendation. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and said, "Give me a week." I worked at the grocery store near our house 3 nights a week. On weekends, I babysat for a family 2 neighborhoods over. They had 3 kids under 10 and a golden retriever that shed on everything. The dad always paid in cash. I kept every dollar in a jar in my closet. Senior year, I started falling asleep in class sometimes. Not because I didn't care, I just couldn't keep up. I was doing all my assignments, applying to colleges, working, and still cooking dinner 3 nights a week. Nobody at home ever asked why I looked tired. They just told me to keep the noise down. When the first acceptance letter came in, I opened it in the garage. No one else was home. It wasn't a top-tier school, but it had a strong program in the major I wanted, and they'd offered me a substantial scholarship. I held the paper for a long time before folding it neatly and putting it in a folder in my backpack. I didn't tell anyone, not at home anyway. By spring, I had 4 acceptance letters. One came with a nearly full ride. Another gave me a spot in their honors program. My counselor helped me figure out the gap, what I'd have to earn on my own. It was steep, but not impossible. At dinner one night in March, my mom asked Kara if she needed help shopping for her grad recital outfit. My dad was showing Dylan something on his phone. I was sitting right there. I had 3 jobs lined up for summer. I was moving out in July. I didn't say a word. Looking back, the signs were there. Not flashing lights or big moments, just small things, layered over time. When Dylan turned 16, my parents signed him up for private driving lessons. My mom used to wait in the car with a coffee while he practiced with the instructor. Then she'd take him to get a smoothie afterward like it was a reward. When Kara turned 16, she got lessons too, with a family friend who ran a driving school. They even bought her a car, not new, but cute, with a bumper sticker that said, "Music is life." When I turned 16, nothing happened. My dad handed me the keys to his old truck one afternoon and said, "If you really need to get somewhere, take this. Just don't ask me to teach you." I drove it around the block once and never again. The steering pulled to the left, and the driver's window wouldn't roll down. My siblings noticed the difference, even if they never said it directly. They used to tease me for trying too hard. Kara called me, the family secretary, whenever she needed help printing out an essay or proofreading an email. Dylan once told me I was like a robot, you just do stuff without asking why. I laughed at the time. I don't think it was meant as a compliment. In school, I was doing well. I wasn't a genius, but I was consistent. I got A's, turned things in on time, stayed after to ask questions. But at home, none of it seemed to register. My parents stopped checking my report cards around sophomore year. I left them on the kitchen counter a few times just to see. They disappeared, but no one ever said anything. When Kara got 3rd place in a regional singing competition, we threw her a party. Balloons, cake, the works. My mom even made one of those little poster boards with photos and glitter. A week later, I won a local essay contest. It wasn't huge, just something our district did, and I brought home the certificate. I showed it to my dad while he was watching TV. He said, "Cool, put it on the fridge." It stayed there for about a week, buried under grocery lists and expired coupons. I remember one dinner when my aunt and uncle came over. My aunt asked if I was applying to any Ivy Leagues. I opened my mouth to answer, but my mom jumped in first. "Oh, please, she's not built for that kind of pressure." I went quiet, the conversation moved on, no one noticed. I didn't bring up college again for a long time after that. Most of my help at home was invisible. I wasn't the one with the big talent or the loud opinions. I filled in the gaps. If the sink was full, I emptied it. If someone needed to be picked up from school, I arranged it. If my mom was behind on errands, I took her grocery list and handled it. I knew which brand of yogurt she liked, which detergent didn't make Kara break out. I paid attention. But no one ever asked how I was doing. It wasn't hostile exactly, just indifferent. When Dylan got a summer internship at a law firm through one of my dad's contacts, they acted like it was the most impressive thing in the world. They kept saying, "He's going places." When Kara got into the state conservatory, my mom cried, I got into the honor society and didn't tell anyone. At school, some teachers started to notice. My English teacher, Ms. Leahy, would stop me after class to ask about my plans. "You've got a sharp mind," she said once. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." I didn't tell her what my parents had said. I just thanked her and kept moving. There were other moments that should have tipped me off. Like when Dylan failed 2 classes senior year and still got taken out for steak to celebrate graduation. Or when Kara crashed her car and they didn't get mad, they just said, "At least you're okay." Meanwhile, I got grounded for returning a library book late because it came with a small fine. I stopped expecting fairness. That helped a little, not with the hurt but with the confusion. At least things were consistent. Around the time I started applying for scholarships, things shifted even more. My dad became colder. I'd ask for advice on how to structure a personal statement, and he'd say, "If you're smart enough to go to college, you should be smart enough to figure that out." One evening, I overheard a conversation between my parents. They didn't know I was in the hallway. My mom said something like, "She's not like the other two, she's so blank." And my dad replied, "We just have to be realistic. She'll be fine as long as she doesn't expect too much." I stood there for a full minute before walking away. I wasn't angry, I was just tired. I started staying at school longer, found excuses to volunteer in the library or help a teacher with filing. It was quieter there, less complicated. That winter, my school had a college night. Parents were invited. Mine didn't come. I ended up sitting next to a classmate's mom who brought a binder and took notes for her son. When she realized I was alone, she let me borrow her pen. Afterward, I emailed a few of the admissions reps on my own. I asked questions, collected brochures, took them home and laid them out on the floor of my bedroom. No one knocked, no one asked how it went. When I got a letter saying I'd been nominated for a statewide scholarship program, I showed it to my mom. She barely skimmed it, said, "Don't get your hopes up." So I didn't. I kept applying anyway. I kept working. I babysat more, took extra shifts at the grocery store. Sometimes I'd come home at 10 p.m., change clothes, and help my dad with invoice filing, even though he didn't say thank you anymore. He just dropped the receipts in a pile on my desk. By then, I wasn't really expecting acknowledgement. But sometimes, I caught myself watching the way they lit up when Dylan or Kara walked in the room. I noticed how quickly they got up to help, how warmly they spoke. I knew I wasn't owed anything, but I couldn't shake the question, what did I do wrong? Still, I stayed quiet, I kept going. Senior year, I got accepted into a competitive weekend program in the city, one that helped prepare students for college entrance interviews. I'd have to take the bus in, then transfer trains. I asked my mom if I could use her commuter pass just on Saturdays. She sighed and said, "That's for work. Don't start playing pretend with serious things." I paid for my own pass out of babysitting money. I packed a peanut butter sandwich and a thermos and went anyway. The program was hard, but I liked it. The other kids were sharp. The instructors didn't let us coast. One of them, a former professor, pulled me aside after a mock interview and said, "You're one of the most prepared students I've seen here. I hope you're aiming high." I said I'm trying, and I meant it. When I came home that day, no one asked how it went. I walked into the kitchen. My dad was watching sports. My mom was on the phone with Kara, who just had a good recital. They were planning a trip to visit her next month. I stood there for a second, waiting for some kind of opening. There wasn't one. I went to my room, changed out of my shoes, and started typing another scholarship essay. The letters started coming in during March, one after another. 4 schools in total, 2 with partial scholarships, 1 with a small grant I hadn't even expected, and 1 that put me on a wait list with a note about possible merit aid in the next round. I lined them up on my desk, read each one twice, then tucked them into a folder. I waited until dinner to bring it up. That night, we had leftovers. My dad was watching something on his tablet, and my mom was finishing a grocery list. Dylan had stopped coming to family dinners by then. He'd moved in with his girlfriend across town, and they were talking about getting a condo. Kara was back at school after spring break. It was just the three of us, like it had been for most of that year. I waited until my dad set his fork down. I said, I got into 4 schools, 2 with scholarships. He didn't look up. My mom glanced over and said, "That's nice." Then she kept writing. I pulled the folder from under the table and slid it toward them. One of them is offering $15,000 per year. The other's offering $12,000. That covers most of tuition. I just need help with housing and books. My dad finally looked up, not at the papers, at me. "You think you're smart," he said. "You'll flunk out in a semester." He said it like it was obvious, like we were all just waiting for me to realize it. I didn't know what to say. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head. I thought maybe there'd be questions, or resistance, or a lecture about debt. I hadn't prepared for that. My mom didn't even flinch. She took the folder, flipped through the letters once, and said, "You're chasing something that's not meant for you. Be realistic." "I am," I said. "These aren't Ivy Leagues. They're good schools, but I chose ones with financial aid. I already figured out a work-study schedule." They weren't listening. My dad picked up his fork again and said, "We're not touching the family fund for this. That money's for something solid, not for dreams." The family fund. I'd heard about it in passing, a small college savings account they'd started when Dylan was a kid. Most of it had gone to him and Kara already, but I thought maybe a little was left. Enough to help cover what the scholarships didn't. I didn't push. I just nodded and took the folder back. The next day, my brother showed up in a new car. Sleek, shiny, way above his usual budget. I was walking home from the bus stop when I saw it parked in the driveway. I went inside and found him in the kitchen. He tossed me the keys and said, "Want to see something cool?" It was leased, low monthly payments. My parents had co-signed. Helped with the down payment too, for commuting to work, Dylan explained, like it was no big deal. I asked him how he got them to agree. He shrugged. They said it made sense, said it was an investment in something reliable. Reliable, that's the word my dad used when he talked about tools. Something you could count on, something that didn't break down. That night, I stayed up late in the living room, printing out a revised budget. I crossed out any costs I couldn't cover on my own. I circled numbers in red, highlighted scholarship details. I even made a chart comparing the remaining expenses to my current earnings from babysitting and the grocery store. I left it on the table, hoping they'd at least glance at it. The next morning it was gone. I checked the trash. It wasn't there. Later that day, I overheard my mom on the phone. She was talking to someone. I think it was my aunt. I was walking past the laundry room when I heard her say it. "She just doesn't have the brains. We'd be throwing money into a fire." She said it so casually, like she wasn't talking about her own kid, like she hadn't watched me stay up night after night writing essays and filling out forms, like I was just another line item that didn't make sense. I didn't say anything. I went back to my room and shut the door. I didn't eat dinner that night. I wrote another scholarship application instead. I stopped showing them things after that. When a 5th letter came in, this one with a decent aid package and a spot in their academic cohort, I read it alone and folded it into my binder. I didn't mention it. At school, Ms. Leahy asked if I'd made a decision. I told her I was still working through the numbers. She offered to help. I gave her the letters. She took them home over the weekend and came back Monday with notes and a recommendation for a local grant I hadn't heard of. I applied that same night. I think she suspected something, but she never asked directly, just said, "You're doing everything right, keep going." At home, things got quieter. I started pulling away without realizing it. I'd leave earlier for school, eat dinner in my room. My mom chalked it up to teen mood swings. My dad didn't seem to notice at all. They were busy helping Dylan set up his condo, picking out appliances, moving furniture, co-signing leases. Kara needed help with recital travel, so they flew out for a long weekend to see her perform. I stayed home and covered the grocery shopping. I told myself it was fine. I didn't want their money. I just wanted to matter. But I stopped saying that out loud. April came, then May. I picked a school, the one with the best scholarship and a nearby bus route that would make commuting from a cheap apartment possible. I accepted the offer. I got confirmation emails. I printed them out just for me. I found a Craigslist listing for a room in a basement apartment. Shared kitchen, no windows, I took it. When I signed the lease, I used the babysitting money I'd been saving since junior year. I didn't tell anyone. I packed in secret. 1 suitcase, 2 boxes. I left a note on the fridge the morning I moved out. It just said, "Thanks for everything, I'll be okay." No one called, no one stopped me. I didn't sleep much that summer. Some nights I stayed up folding laundry or doing prep for the morning shift. Other nights I just lay on my mattress, rereading the acceptance letters I'd kept in a plastic folder under my bed. I didn't cry. I didn't really feel anything. I just kept going over the details, tuition breakdowns, grant amounts, deadlines. Like if I memorized them hard enough, the rest wouldn't matter. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not my friends. Not even my closest one, Jamie, who was still waiting on her own FAFSA results and kept texting me about campus housing tour. I just told her I was figuring things out. She didn't press. A few days after school ended, my guidance counselor, Mr. Herrera, called me into his office. He had a stack of folders on his desk and a travel mug with faded lettering that said, "World's Okayest Dad." He asked me to close the door. He didn't waste time. "I heard from Ms. Leahy that you might be having trouble with funding." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. He opened a drawer and pulled out a packet. "There are a few things we can try. Emergency aid through the state, a couple of work-study programs, maybe even private grants." He slid the packet across the desk. It was thick. I took it. That was the first time someone treated me like I belonged in college. Not like I was asking for something I hadn't earned, but like I'd already earned it and just needed help clearing the last hurdle. It made everything feel real again. I left his office with a to-do list and a little bit of hope. That same afternoon, I stopped by the coffee shop near the library and asked if they were hiring. The manager said they were down a barista. She handed me an application. I filled it out on the spot. Then I walked 2 blocks to the hardware store where I used to buy school project supplies and asked the same thing. They had a stockroom opening. By the time I got home, I'd lined up 2 interviews. Both jobs offered me shifts. I took them. Coffee shop in the mornings, stockroom on weekends, and 2 evenings a week. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid. I bought a pair of non-slip shoes and some heavy-duty gloves. I didn't tell my parents. The apartment I found was in the basement of an older house, owned by a retired teacher named Mrs. Adler. She rented out 2 rooms. Mine had a low ceiling and a single window that looked out onto a cement wall, but the rent was cheap and included utilities. I paid first and last months with what I had saved. Mrs. Adler asked if I needed furniture. I said no. She didn't press. I moved in on a Thursday. My suitcase and 2 boxes, that was all. I slept on a borrowed mattress on the floor and used a cardboard box as a nightstand. I kept my scholarship folder under my pillow the first few nights, like it might disappear if I didn't hold on to it. Orientation was in 2 weeks. I marked it on a paper calendar I'd taped to the wall. The days blurred a little after that. Coffee shop shifts started at 6:30 a.m. I set 3 alarms to make sure I didn't oversleep. On the days I didn't work there, I went to the library and filled out more aid forms, revised my student budget, or watched online lectures from the college's prep modules. I didn't go out. I didn't see my friends. I told them I was busy with work, which was true. One morning, I caught a customer staring at the scar on my knuckle where I'd burned it on the espresso machine. She said, "You don't look like you belong here." I said, "It's just temporary." She nodded, but I don't think she believed me. After the first week, I started bringing a notebook to work. On breaks, I wrote out my class schedule, drew up to-do lists, practiced introducing myself like I wasn't nervous. It helped. Sometimes I thought about calling home, just to check in, but I didn't. I figured if they wanted to know how I was doing, they'd ask. They didn't. The Sunday before orientation, I got a text from my mom. It just said, "Hope you're doing okay. Dylan's new job is going great. He might get promoted already." I stared at it for a while before putting my phone down. I didn't reply. Classes started the following Monday. I took the bus 25 minutes each way. First day, I wore a pressed shirt and jeans with no holes. I brought a notebook and 3 pens. I got there early and sat in the front. The professor opened with a simple question. "Why are you here?" Around the room, people gave answers. To get ahead. To make my family proud. to figure out what I want to do. When it was my turn, I said, because I worked hard to be. The professor nodded. We moved on. The first few weeks were hard. I had to figure out how to balance my shifts, commute, and homework. I dropped one class early on, an upper-level science I wasn't ready for, and replaced it with a writing seminar. I stayed after to ask questions. I kept a running list of every assignment, test, and reading. I used highlighters like a system. At the coffee shop, no one asked about school. At the stockroom, my supervisor said, "I thought you were older. You work like someone who's got bills." I said, "I do." He didn't ask more after that. I didn't have time to feel much. But there was one night, maybe 2 months in, where I sat at the bus stop after closing shift, holding my class notes and a half-eaten sandwich, and I realized something. No one had carried me here. No one had cleared the path, and I was still standing. That thought stuck with me. I started saying no to extra shifts that overlapped with study time. I stopped checking my phone for texts that never came. I added a picture of my school ID to the inside of my binder, just to remind myself. When midterms came, I passed every class. My writing professor left a note on my paper, "You have a clarity most students work years to find." I saved it. I didn't tell anyone at home. I didn't think they'd care. Instead, I took the paper and pinned it to my wall next to my calendar. It stayed there the rest of the semester. I moved out in July, just after high school graduation. No ceremony, no packed car, just 2 boxes and a backpack. I had a key to a basement room with a futon, a folding table, and one small window you couldn't open. Rent was low because the ceiling leaked when it rained. I didn't mind. I had a place to sleep and a door that locked. My parents didn't help with the move. They didn't offer, and I didn't ask. I told them I'd figured it out. My mom just said, "Well, if that's what you want." My dad gave me a nod like I just mentioned I was switching shampoo brands, nothing more. 3 days before classes started, they sent a group text to me, Dylan, and Kara. It was a picture of the backyard. They'd put up new string lights over the patio and planted flowers along the fence. The caption said, "Fall vibes starting early." I didn't reply. Neither did my siblings, at least not in the thread. I assume they answered separately. Later that day, my mom sent me a separate message. "If you ever need help, remember, you chose this path." I stared at it for a long time, then I deleted it. That semester, I registered for 18 credit hours. 5 classes. One of them met twice a week at 8 a.m. on the other side of campus, which meant leaving the house before sunrise to make the first bus. I kept my job at the coffee shop and picked up a night shift cleaning offices downtown. A family friend who worked at a small clinic let me know they needed help filing paperwork on weekends, just a few hours a week, but it paid better than babysitting. I said yes. I kept my calendar taped to the wall. Color-coded, red for classes, blue for work, green for deadlines. I gave myself 2 days a month with nothing scheduled. Most months, I ended up filling them anyway. Midway through September, I started eating dinner standing up. It was faster. A granola bar during the walk to class, soup from the microwave in a borrowed mug. I wasn't trying to be dramatic, I just didn't have time to sit down. I still got my assignments in on time. I still sat in the front row. One of my professors, Dr. Singh, started asking me to stay after lectures. Not because I was behind, the opposite. She wanted to recommend me for a research assistant slot in the spring. "It's competitive," she said, "but I think you have the discipline for it." I nodded, thanked her, and made a note to look into it later. Then I ran to catch the bus so I wouldn't be late for work. By October, I was tired in a way I didn't know how to name. Not just sleepy. Worn down. I didn't complain. I didn't think I had the right to. Every choice I'd made had been mine. Every shift, every late night, every hour spent cleaning someone else's trash from a carpeted office floor, all mine. The week before Thanksgiving, my mom texted me again. "Will you be home for the holiday? Dylan's bringing his girlfriend." I hadn't heard from her in 6 weeks. I typed out a response, "Can't make it, sorry," then deleted it. I didn't say anything. The day came and went. No one followed up. That Thursday, I worked a double. Coffee shop in the morning, cleaning shift at night. I ate my dinner, cold rice and steamed vegetables at the bus stop under a broken streetlight. It was fine. Quiet at least. A few classmates posted pictures with their families. Football games, pumpkin pie, smiling parents in matching flannel. I scrolled past them without stopping. One of the women I worked with at the clinic, an older woman named Denise, brought in leftover turkey sandwiches that Saturday. She handed me one wrapped in foil and said, "It's not much, but it's got real stuffing in it." I said thank you and ate it on the walk home. That was my first semester. There were moments where I almost slipped. A missed alarm, a migraine that made the lights in the lecture hall unbearable, a night when I forgot to set out my uniform and had to wear a coffee-stained shirt to my second job. But I kept going. Finals came and went. I passed every class. One with an A- I'd fought hard for. I didn't celebrate. Just crossed the last due date off the calendar and hung up a new one. Over winter break, I worked straight through. Both jobs, every shift. I needed the hours. Rent was due again, and the bus pass didn't renew itself. On New Year's Eve, I got a message from Kara. A photo of her and some classmates clinking glasses at a rooftop party. She added, "Hope you're doing something fun tonight?" I didn't answer. I didn't have the energy to fake it. I worked until 10, then went home and showered. Fell asleep before midnight. Second semester was harder. One of my professors required group projects, and I got paired with 2 students who never responded to emails. I ended up doing most of the work myself, got a B on it anyway. I didn't complain. I had to drop one of my shifts when my back started acting up from lifting supply boxes at the clinic. My supervisor said, "You've got to take care of yourself, kid." But she didn't offer to change the schedule. So I quit and found another job doing data entry at a nonprofit. Fewer hours, better pay. I worked in a supply closet they called an office. The fluorescent light hummed nonstop. I learned to tune it out. By spring break, I'd started eating regular meals again. I found a second-hand microwave on Facebook Marketplace and brought it home on the bus in a cardboard box. Mrs. Adler helped me carry it inside. I made rice and beans, sometimes soup. Nothing fancy, but it was warm. One night in March, I got another message from my parents. It was short. "Hope school is going well. Let us know if you need anything." I didn't know what they meant by anything. Money, advice, a ride. I left it unanswered. That same week, Dr. Singh stopped me after class again. "The research assistant position is still open. I gave them your name." I thanked her. This time I meant it fully. I added it to my calendar. Green ink, underlined twice. Things weren't easy, but I wasn't drowning anymore. I'd built something, even if it was small and shaky, even if no one saw it but me. I still had the scholarship letters, still kept them in the folder under my bed. I didn't look at them much anymore, but I liked knowing they were there. Proof that I'd gotten in, that I was here, that I'd stayed. The years blurred together after a while. Class, shift, bus ride, study, repeat. I made a system out of exhaustion, a way to function on 4 hours of sleep and leftover coffee. I kept a notebook just for lists, assignments, bills, groceries, reminders to call financial aid. I didn't think about how tired I was unless it interfered with something I couldn't afford to mess up. I lost one of my jobs after sophomore year. The nonprofit ran out of funding and cut the admin hours. My supervisor left a voicemail telling me not to come in the next week. Just like that. No warning, no severance. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall for a while before pulling out my laptop to update my resume. The next month, I took out a small loan, just enough to cover rent and books. I hated doing it, but there wasn't another option. The application asked for parental income. I left it blank and explained my situation in the additional comments. The loan came through, high interest, no forgiveness, but it kept me afloat. I missed out on a lot. I couldn't join any clubs. I skipped every student event that didn't have free food. When classmates posted pictures from spring break trips or study abroad programs, I scrolled past quickly. I didn't resent them. I just didn't let myself think too hard about it. My world was small. Classrooms, coffee shop, bus stops, the dim library basement where I studied between shifts. But I stayed. Junior year, something shifted. I was taking a political theory course that required weekly essays. The professor, a woman named Dr. Keene, returned one of mine with a handwritten note in the margin. "You belong in this field." I read that sentence 10 times. Then I folded the paper carefully and slid it into the back of my notebook. A week later, she pulled me aside after class. "There's an opening in the honors program," she said. "It's late in the year, but I'm recommending you." I didn't know what to say. I hadn't thought of myself as someone who got invited into things. I filled out the paperwork that night. The following semester, I was officially enrolled in the honors seminar. The work was harder, the expectations higher. I stayed up later, read everything twice. I took notes on legal pads and rewrote them in a spiral notebook. I memorized the names of philosophers I'd never heard of before that year. I kept my head down and didn't tell anyone, not at home, not at work. I hadn't updated my family in months. I stopped sending grades after freshman year. When they asked how I was, I gave short answers. Doing fine, busy. They stopped pushing. I think they assumed I'd dropped out. That was easier in a way, letting them believe the worst. Senior year, I got an email I had to read twice before it sank in. The subject line said, "Congratulations, Valedictorian nomination." I clicked it with shaking hands. The message said I'd been nominated by multiple faculty members. My GPA was the highest in the department. They wanted to schedule an interview for final selection. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or cry. Instead, I opened a new document and started drafting my answers for the interview. I didn't tell anyone, not right away. A week later, I got the confirmation. I'd been selected. I was going to speak at graduation. I told Denise, the woman I used to work with at the clinic. She sent me a thumbs-up emoji and 3 exclamation marks. I told Dr. Singh, who said, "I'm not surprised, just proud." I didn't tell my parents. But word got out. A distant cousin saw a post from the university's social media page. There was a photo of me receiving a certificate at the honors banquet and a short caption about the upcoming valedictorian address. He sent it to my mom. 2 days later, I got a message. "Heard you're doing well. We should come to graduation." Just like that, no apology, no mention of the years in between, just a vague offer wrapped in assumption. As if they'd been watching the whole time, quietly rooting for me from the sidelines. As if they hadn't missed 4 years of missed calls, unread emails, birthdays, deadlines, breakdowns. I didn't answer right away. I showed the message to Dr. Keene. She said, "It's your call. No one else gets to decide what you owe." I waited another day before replying. I told them the time and date of the ceremony, nothing else, no invitation, no encouragement. I didn't ask if they were proud. I didn't care. The week before graduation, the school hosted a small event for the honors students. Families were invited. Most came with their parents, siblings, people holding bouquets and taking pictures. I went alone. Wore a black dress I'd found at a thrift store and pressed the wrinkles out with a borrowed iron. There was a reception afterward. I stood near the back, sipping ginger ale from a plastic cup, pretending to check my phone. One of the professors came over and said, "Is your family here?" I smiled and said, "They'll be at the ceremony." That was enough. I spent the next few days rehearsing my speech. I read it out loud to myself until I could do it without looking at the paper. I timed my pauses, cut out the parts that felt too personal, left in the line about failure not being the end of a story, just a place to begin again. I kept the printed copy folded in my bag, next to the letters I'd brought with me all those years ago. I still had them, every acceptance, every scholarship. I hadn't read them in a while, but I liked knowing they were close. Proof that I'd started with nothing and built something anyway, something that couldn't be taken or explained away. I didn't know if my parents would show up. I didn't care, not really. But I had a feeling they would. I didn't stop them from attending. I figured, let them see. Not for me, not for reconciliation, but because some things speak louder than silence. I didn't know if it would matter to them. Honestly, I didn't think about that part too much. It wasn't my job anymore. The night before the ceremony, my phone buzzed just after midnight. A message from my dad. "Proud of you, always knew you had it in you." I stared at the screen for a long time. It didn't make me angry, just tired. Like someone trying to sneak into a movie they skipped the first 2 hours of. I didn't reply. That morning, I got to the auditorium early. I sat in the green room with the other speakers, listening to someone's nervous pacing and the soft buzz of a steamer pressing out gown wrinkles. My own gown was already on. My speech was in my pocket, printed in 14-point font on 2 sheets of cream paper. I hadn't looked at it since yesterday. I knew every word. One of the assistants came in and called my name, said I'd be going up third. I nodded, drank half a bottle of water. When they called us to line up, I stood at the end of the row. The walk to the stage was slow, deliberate. Rows of people craning their necks, squinting under the lights, leaning over to take pictures. Somewhere in the middle, I saw them, my parents. They were standing near the aisle. My mom was holding a bouquet wrapped in tissue paper. My dad had his phone raised, recording. They both looked different, older somehow, more put together than I remembered. My mom wore pearls. My dad was in a pressed shirt I'd never seen before. I didn't wave, I didn't smile, I just kept walking. When they heard my name, Valedictorian, class of, they stood up, clapped like the rest of the room. I didn't look at them. The speech went by faster than I thought it would. I hit every line, every pause. The auditorium was quiet in the right places, warm with laughter in others. I ended with a simple sentence. We all start somewhere, but it's what we carry forward that defines us. Applause, then silence again as I stepped down. I didn't go back to the green room. I stayed backstage, near the side entrance, and waited for the rest of the ceremony to finish. Afterward, I slipped into the crowd like everyone else. People were hugging, crying, taking photos in front of the school banners. I stood to the side, scanning faces I didn't know, half hoping mine had already left. But they hadn't. They found me near the back steps. My mom was holding out the flowers, a cautious smile on her face. I thought these would be nice, she said. I took them, they were lilies, I don't even like lilies, but I said thanks. My dad stepped forward. That speech was something else. You really, wow, you've grown into yourself. I nodded, said nothing. There was a pause, then my mom asked, do you want to get lunch? I think part of me expected that. The invitation, the attempt to make this a clean ending, but there was nothing clean about it. I said, I've got plans. She blinked, with who? A professor, a few friends, just a small thing. Another pause. Well, my dad said, clearing his throat, we're just proud, that's all. I got here without you, I said, not angry, just quiet. They both went still. I know, my mom said after a second, but we're here now. That sentence sat between us like a stone. I have to go, I said. I turned before they could say more, walked back toward the other side of the quad where Dr. Singh was waiting with a small group from the honors program. They handed me a sparkling cider and asked about future plans. No one asked about my parents. Later that evening, I got another message. You looked beautiful up there. We're sorry for the distance. Can we talk sometime soon? I didn't answer right away. I sat with it for a few days. There was a part of me, small, quiet, still damaged, that wanted to say yes. That wanted a version of events where we fixed things, where they sat across from me in a quiet diner and said the words they never had and meant them. But there was a bigger part of me that remembered everything else. Not just what they said, what they didn't say. The birthdays skipped, the emails ignored, the sound of my mom's voice in the laundry room calling my brain a waste of money. Still, I didn't delete the message. I just left it unread. That summer, I moved into a new apartment, above ground, with real windows. My roommate was a grad student in biochemistry. We split groceries and shared a coffee maker. I started working part-time for the university's outreach program, helping high school seniors navigate financial aid. I led workshops at public schools. I printed extra handouts because some of the kids didn't have stable internet at home. I told them what no one had told me: you don't have to be perfect, you just have to keep showing up. One of the students asked if I'd always been this confident. I said no, but I stayed. A few weeks after graduation, my parents sent another message. This one was longer, less polished. We've been thinking a lot about what we missed, about how we treated you. We want to understand. We want to know what you need from us, even if it's nothing. I read it twice. Then I replied, thanks for the message. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'll let you know when I am. That was the truth. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be, but I wanted to be honest about that too. They answered quickly. Whenever you're ready, no pressure, we'll be here. I didn't expect that. I didn't know what to do with it. But I left the door open, just a crack. It's been 3 years since graduation. 3 full years of quiet mornings, classrooms that smell like dry erase markers, and stacks of application essays in my inbox. I teach part-time now, introductory writing at the university where I earned my degree. Just 2 sections a semester, enough to keep me in the world I worked so hard to enter. But my real work happens off campus. I spend most of my time at a nonprofit that helps low-income high school students apply to college. We work out of a small building on the east side, nothing fancy, but the coffee's always hot and the printer usually works. The students come in after school, dragging backpacks and self-doubt, sometimes with a parent in tow, more often alone. We sit at folding tables, talk through FAFSA forms, revise personal statements. I keep extra pens in my bag because someone always forgets. Some days the work feels slow, like nothing's moving fast enough, like there are too many barriers and not enough bridges. But then I get a message, I got in, or they gave me a scholarship, and suddenly everything clicks again. There's one student I think about a lot. Brianna, 17, smart, sharp as anything. She wrote her essay about watching her older brother work 3 jobs to keep their family afloat. She almost didn't submit it, thought it made her sound too sad. I told her it made her sound real, told her the truth matters. She stared at me for a second and said, "How do you know what matters?" I said, because people once told me it didn't, and I'm still here. She blinked a few times, then smiled, quietly like it hurt. We got her into 3 schools. One gave her full tuition. She's there now, first year. My parents still text me here and there. Holidays, birthdays, sometimes out of the blue, saw your name on the alumni newsletter. Congrats. Or your cousin says you're doing good work. Occasionally a photo from the backyard or an update on Dylan or Kara. They never apologized, not directly. The closest they come is a slow rewrite of history. We always knew you'd find your path. You've always been the determined one. We're so proud of who you've become. I don't correct them. I don't bring up the silence, the disbelief, the way they poured every ounce of faith into 2 kids and left nothing for the third. I don't need to. I used to wonder if I'd ever get an apology that felt real. Something that acknowledged the damage, the cold distance, the things that were said and the ones that weren't. But the truth is, I stopped waiting for that a while ago. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always a door you open for someone else. Sometimes it's just a room you build for yourself. A place where their version of the story doesn't matter anymore. Last winter, my mom asked if I wanted to come home for Christmas. I told her I already had plans. She didn't argue, just said, "Let me know if you change your mind." I didn't. But I appreciated that she left it at that. There's a file on my computer with every speech I've given at the nonprofit, parent nights, scholarship panels, school counselor trainings. I always end them the same way. You don't need anyone's permission to try. You don't need to be chosen to belong. You just have to stay long enough to become undeniable. A few weeks ago, Brianna messaged me from her dorm. She was struggling with a tough professor. Felt like she didn't fit in. Thought maybe she'd made a mistake. I told her what someone once told me, "You're doing everything right, keep going." She said okay. That was enough. I think about that a lot, how a single sentence, said at the right time, can reroute someone's entire life. I don't take that lightly. Every time I sit across from a student who's been told they're not enough, I remember exactly how that feels. I remember the way it digs in, the way it lingers long after the person who said it has moved on. But I also know what comes after. I've lived it. I used to think my story was about proving people wrong. Showing up, doing the work, crossing the stage so they'd have no choice but to see me. But that's not really it. The real story is quieter. It's the work you do when no one's clapping, the choices you make when no one's watching, the decision to keep showing up, not for validation, but for yourself. That's what I try to teach now. My office wall has a quote from one of my old professors. Justice doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up in who you become. I read it every morning. I don't keep the scholarship letters under my pillow anymore. They're in a folder at the back of a filing cabinet next to tax forms and workshop agendas. I haven't looked at them in a while. But I haven't thrown them away. Sometimes I think about the girl who carried them everywhere, afraid they'd vanish if she let go. I think about how much she carried: expectations, silence, rejection, hope. I want to tell her she was never the burden, just the one left to carry it. She wouldn't have believed me then, but maybe she would now. I walk through campus sometimes, between my classes, past the same buildings I once studied in, cried in, slept in when the buses ran late. It's strange seeing them as an outsider, but also peaceful. Like I've made peace with who I was here, and who I am now. The last message I got from my dad said, "Saw the article about your nonprofit. You're doing important work." No punctuation, just that. I saved it. Not because it fixed anything, it didn't. But because even the quiet things count. Even if no one else hears them, I do. And I know how the story ends. If you've ever had to prove yourself to people who never believed in you, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. What would you have said to my parents on graduation day? Have you ever had to succeed in silence just to protect your peace? If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that they're not alone, and that quiet perseverance can be the loudest kind of power.